What if the biggest failures of the 1970s were actually the decade's bravest films? Movies critics shrugged off, audiences ignored, and studios quietly buried. Tonight's list isn't about flops. It's about films that detonated at the box office and aged into dangerous works of art. Ready to argue in the comments? Number 18. Sorcerer 1977. This movie didn't fail quietly. It exploded, vanished, and took a legendary director down with it. William Friedkin followed The Exorcist with this brutal remake of a French thriller, and audiences flat out rejected it. Why? Because Sorcerer showed up angry, grimy, and merciless at the exact moment people wanted friendly aliens and feel-good spectacle. Four men from different corners of the world are trapped in a rotting jungle town, offered one suicidal job hauling unstable explosives through terrain that actively wants them dead. The plot is simple. The experience is punishing. Friedkin shot this like a war documentary, dragging his cast into real danger, real fear, and real exhaustion. You can feel it in every frame. Critics were confused. Studio executives panicked. The title alone scared people off. Viewers expected magic. They got dread. It barely made a dent financially and was written off as an arrogant misfire. Friedkin's career never fully recovered. Here's the secret. Sorcerer might be one of the most intense thrillers ever made. The bridge sequence alone is pure cinema terror. No music cues, no safety net, just men versus gravity. Tangerine Dream's score pulses like a dying heart. Directors quietly studied it for decades. Today, it plays like a prophecy about risk, masculinity, and punishment. It didn't fail because it was bad. It failed because it was too honest. Number 17. McCabe and Mrs. Miller, 1971. Audiences walked into this expecting a Western. What they got was a funeral dirge for the American myth. Robert Altman took the frontier and drained it of glory, heroism, and clean victories. That choice killed this movie at the box office almost instantly. Warren Beatty plays McCabe, a small-time gambler pretending to be a big deal. Julie Christie's Mrs. Miller is the real power, cold, brilliant, and emotionally guarded. Together, they build a muddy brothel town where capitalism shows up faster than justice. Nothing is clean. Nothing is noble. Even the love story feels doomed from the start. Critics were split. Some called it slow, others called it cynical. Studios didn't know how to sell a Western where the gunfight happens in silence and the hero dies alone in the snow while the town ignores him. Financially, it disappeared. Now it's considered one of the greatest revisionist Westerns ever made. The Leonard Cohen songs feel like ghosts narrating the film. The final act is devastating in its restraint. No speeches, no triumph, just entropy. Filmmakers from Scorsese to the Coen brothers openly borrowed its DNA. This wasn't a flop because it lacked craft. It flopped because it told the truth about how empires really end, quietly, meaninglessly, in the cold. Number 16. The Long Goodbye 1973. This movie insulted everyone who loved classic detective stories, and that's exactly why it failed. Robert Altman took Raymond Chandler's iconic Private Eye and dropped him into a sun-bleached, morally bankrupt Los Angeles where principles mean nothing and loyalty is a joke. Elliot Gould's Philip Marlowe is always one step behind, wearing yesterday's values in a city that already moved on. He mutters, wanders, and gets played by everyone. Audiences hated it. Critics were baffled. Fans of traditional crime films felt betrayed. The box office response was ice cold. What they missed was the satire. The Long Goodbye isn't mocking Marlowe. It's mourning him. The film treats integrity like an endangered species. Every character sells out. Every relationship rots. By the time Marlowe finally acts, it's shocking not because it's violent, but because it's the only honest thing left. Altman's loose style, overlapping dialogue, and repeating theme song drove studio executives insane. They wanted structure. He gave them disillusionment. Financially, it barely mattered. Today, it's a cornerstone of neo-noir. That ending still hits like a slap. It predicted the death of the old Hollywood hero years before audiences were ready to admit it. This wasn't a miss. It was a warning. Number 15. Heaven's Gate, 1980. This movie didn't just bomb. It detonated an entire studio era. Michael Cimino walked into Hollywood with unlimited power after The Deer Hunter and walked out leaving scorched earth behind. Audiences laughed. Executives panicked. Critics sharpened knives. Heaven's Gate became shorthand for excess and ego. Set during the Johnson County War, the film follows wealthy cattle barons crushing immigrant farmers under the polite banner of law and order. Cimino shot endless takes, rebuilt entire towns, and chased perfection like a madman. The budget spiraled. The release collapsed. United Artists nearly folded. Here's what history got wrong. Strip away the legend and you find a haunting, painterly epic about power-erasing humanity. Vilmos Zsigmond's cinematography turns dust and sunlight into living memory. The roller skating sequence feels like a dream that knows it's about to die. Characters don't posture, they endure. At the time, critics called it bloated and incoherent. Today, directors quietly call it misunderstood. The extended cut reveals intention, rhythm, and a tragic through line about America devouring its own promises. This film wasn't rejected because it was empty. It was rejected because it showed capitalism as violence, and audiences weren't ready to see that in widescreen beauty. Number 14, The Last Detail, 1973. This movie slipped through the cracks because it refused to comfort anyone. Jack Nicholson gives one of his rawest performances, yet audiences barely noticed. Maybe because the story doesn't build to triumph. It just keeps peeling skin. Two Navy lifers escort a young sailor to prison for a petty offense. Along the way, they try to give him one last taste of freedom. Sounds simple. It isn't. Every stop exposes cruelty hiding behind procedure. Authority isn't heroic here. It's bored and casually destructive. Nicholson's character drinks, jokes, and rebels, but the rebellion is hollow. He knows the system will win. That knowledge poisons every laugh. Hal Ashby directs with restraint, letting silence and awkward pauses do the damage. When anger finally erupts, it feels earned and useless at the same time. The box office response was muted. Studios didn't know how to sell a road movie that ends in quiet despair. Critics admired it but moved on. No spectacle, no victory. Now it's seen as one of the most honest films ever made about institutional power. It influenced generations of filmmakers who wanted truth instead of closure. This wasn't a failure. It was a mirror people didn't want to look into. Number 13, Daisy Miller, 1974. Peter Bogdanovich was on top of the world. Then this movie quietly sank him. Coming off massive hits, he adapted Henry James into a restrained European set drama that audiences flatly rejected. They wanted charm. He gave them discomfort. Sybil Shepherd plays Daisy, a young American woman navigating rigid old-world social rules that punish independence. Her warmth is mistaken for impropriety. Her honesty becomes scandal. The tragedy unfolds not through explosions, but through whispers and judgments. Viewers at the time found it cold. Critics dismissed it as stiff. Financially, it vanished. But look closer, and it's a devastating critique of how societies destroy women who refuse to perform humility. Bogdanovich directs with surgical control. The camera watches people observe Daisy rather than understand her. Every smile costs her something. The ending lands not as shock, but as inevitability. Today, the film reads as quietly radical. It predicts modern conversations about reputation, surveillance, and moral policing. This wasn't a miscalculation. It was a filmmaker refusing to pander at the worst possible commercial moment. Number 12, The Missouri Breaks, 1976. This movie confused audiences so badly they didn't know whether to laugh, panic, or leave the theater. And that confusion killed it. The Missouri Breaks paired Marlon Brando and Jack Nicholson at the height of their powers, then let both men run slightly unhinged in opposite directions. Nicholson plays a cattle rustler trying to go legitimate. Brando plays a hired enforcer who behaves like a polite nightmare. Brando's performance alone detonated expectations. He drifts between accents, wears odd costumes, smiles while threatening violence, and feels like a walking prank played on the audience. Critics didn't know what to do with it. Some called Brando ridiculous, others called the tone broken. Studios expected a clean Western showdown. What they got was a surreal power struggle where menace hides behind charm and civility. Financially, it stalled. Word of mouth was brutal. Viewers wanted clarity. The film offered unease. But decades later, that unease is the point. Brando's character feels like a symbol of authority that doesn't need logic, only permission. Nichols frames violence as casual, almost conversational. Modern filmmakers adore this movie for its nerve. It bends genre rules without apology. It shows masculinity as performance and control as theater. The laughs stick in your throat. The danger never announces itself. This wasn't a failure of execution. It was a failure of expectation. The audience came for a Western. They walked into a psychological ambush. Number 11. The Gambler, 1974. This movie scared audiences because it refused to moralize. James Caan plays a literature professor addicted to risk, not thrills, not rebellion, but pure self-destruction. The film doesn't rescue him. That made people uncomfortable. There's no inspirational arc here, no learning moment. Caan's character knows exactly what he's doing and keeps doing it anyway. He gambles money, relationships, dignity, and safety with the same dead calm. The danger isn't chaos, it's intention. At the time, critics admired the performance, but audiences stayed away. The film made modest noise, then disappeared. Studios didn't know how to sell a story where the lead actively walks toward ruin without regret. What makes it powerful now is its honesty. This isn't about cards or debt. It's about compulsion as identity. Race directs with restraint, letting Caan's stillness carry the menace. Every scene feels like a dare issued to the viewer. The final moments are shocking not because they escalate, but because they confirm what the film has been saying all along. Some people don't want escape, they want impact. Today, it's viewed as one of the most fearless character studies of the decade. This wasn't ignored because it lacked drama. It was ignored because it told the truth without blinking. Number 10. The Friends of Eddie Coyle, 1973. This movie died quietly because it refused to glamorize crime. No flashy robberies, no clever masterminds, just tired men trading information to stay alive one more week. Audiences expecting excitement were met with bleak realism. Robert Mitchum plays Eddie, a small-time operator caught between criminals and law enforcement. He isn't brave. He isn't smart. He's scared. The film watches him unravel in diners, cars, and parking lots, places where loyalty dissolves over coffee. Critics respected it, but the box office barely noticed. There was no hero to root for, no victory to celebrate, just inevitability creeping closer with every conversation. Director Peter Yates shoots Boston like a trap. Cold light, empty spaces, dialogue that sounds casual but carries fatal consequences. Mitchum underplays everything, making Eddie's desperation feel painfully real. This film influenced generations of crime cinema. It showed that the most dangerous moments happen off-screen, in whispers and deals. Modern directors cite it as a blueprint for realism over spectacle. At the time, audiences wanted myths. This gave them paperwork, fear, and betrayal. That honesty doomed it commercially. Now it stands as one of the most authentic crime films ever made. Not because it thrills, but because it understands how small, scared people actually get crushed. Number 9. California Split, 1974. This movie slipped past audiences because it looked messy on purpose. No big arc, no clean redemption, just two men drifting through a haze of bets, luck, and empty victories. In the 70s, viewers wanted structure. Robert Altman gave them a vibe and dared them to keep up. George Segal and Elliot Gould play gamblers who don't chase money as much as momentum. They bounce from racetracks to card rooms, chasing the next moment that feels alive. Wins feel hollow, losses barely register. The real addiction is motion. Critics admired its looseness, but couldn't sell it to the public. Studios didn't know how to market a movie where the plot refuses to announce itself. Financially, it evaporated. What makes it powerful now is how modern it feels. The overlapping dialogue, the casual chaos, the way scenes bleed into each other. It captures a specific American itch, the need to keep rolling because stopping means thinking. Altman doesn't judge these men, he observes them. That neutrality unsettled audiences. There's no lecture, no punishment, just a quiet question hanging over every scene. What happens when winning stops meaning anything? The final moments don't resolve. They echo. That choice was poison at the box office and gold for future filmmakers. This film predicted an entire generation of character-driven cinema where mood matters more than mechanics. It didn't fail because it lacked tension. It failed because it trusted the audience to find meaning without being told where to look. Number 8. The Duelists, 1977. This movie arrived too refined for its own good. Ridley Scott's debut feature looked like a museum painting that suddenly started bleeding. Audiences didn't know what to do with a historical drama this cold, precise, and obsessive. Two officers in Napoleonic France spend years locked in a pointless feud, fighting again and again for reasons even they barely remember. Honor becomes habit. Violence becomes routine. Time passes. Nothing heals. Critics praised the visuals, but the box office shrugged. There were no speeches, no sweeping romance, just repetition and decay. Studios quietly moved on. What people missed was how radical it was. Scott staged every confrontation differently, showing how obsession mutates with age. Early clashes feel theatrical. Later ones feel desperate and small. The world changes. The feud refuses to. The film treats pride as a disease. It spreads slowly and leaves ruin behind. Harvey Keitel and Keith Carradine play their roles with restraint, letting silence carry the weight. Today, it's recognized as one of the most visually disciplined films of the decade. Every frame feels intentional. Every shadow says something about time and erosion. This wasn't ignored because it was boring. It was ignored because it demanded patience and reflection. It asked viewers to sit with repetition and ask why people cling to grudges long after they stop making sense. Number 7. A New Leaf, 1971. This movie was sabotaged before audiences ever had a chance to find it. Elaine May delivered a dark, razor-sharp comedy that studios panicked over. They cut it down, softened its edges, and released it without understanding what they had. Walter Matthau plays a wealthy man burning through his fortune, scrambling to secure comfort through marriage. May herself plays a shy botanist who becomes his solution. The humor is cruel, quiet, and surgical. Audiences expecting broad laughs were confused. Critics didn't know whether to treat it as romance or satire. Financially, it stalled. But beneath the awkward tone is one of the most fearless comedies of the era. May skewers entitlement, gender roles, and transactional relationships without a single speech explaining the joke. Mathau's performance balances charm and calculation in a way that still feels dangerous. The studio interference dulled its impact, but even the compromised version bites. The pauses matter. The politeness feels threatening. The laughter comes late and sticks uncomfortably. Today, Elaine May is finally recognized as a visionary. This film reads like a warning about emotional economics long before the term existed. It wasn't rejected because it failed. It was rejected because it refused to play nice. Number 6. The Last Movie, 1971. This film didn't just confuse audiences. It actively challenged them, dared them, and then walked away without explaining itself. Dennis Hopper followed Easy Rider with something far stranger and far more confrontational. The backlash was immediate. Critics were ruthless. The box office response was brutal. Hollywood labeled Hopper unmanageable almost overnight. Set in a Peruvian village after a Western production wraps up, the movie shows locals recreating the film using scraps, props, and half-understood ideas of cinema. Reality fractures. Performance replaces meaning. Violence becomes ritual instead of story. Audiences expected rebellion with a pulse. What they got was disorientation. Scenes loop, characters vanish, narrative dissolves. Studio executives didn't know how to cut it. Viewers didn't know how to process it. What makes the last movie powerful now is how prophetic it feels. Hopper was attacking the idea of cinema as colonial spectacle, exposing how movies impose myths onto places and people who never asked for them. Long before meta-storytelling became fashionable, this film was tearing down the illusion from the inside. Directors later called it fearless. Film scholars reevaluated it as a key experimental work of the decade. It failed because it refused to entertain in familiar ways. This wasn't a career suicide note. It was a manifesto audiences weren't ready to read. Number 5. Wake in Fright, 1971. This movie nearly disappeared forever, not because it was ignored, but because it was too raw for comfort. Released quietly, then lost for years, Wake in Fright unnerved everyone who saw it and left audiences unsettled rather than satisfied. A schoolteacher stranded in the Australian outback descends into a nightmarish spiral of isolation, ritualized masculinity, and psychological erosion. There's no escape, just heat, alcohol, and pressure closing in. Critics didn't know how to frame it. Audiences recoiled. The tone was relentless, the atmosphere suffocating. Financially, it vanished. What later generations recognized was its honesty. This film exposes how environments shape behavior, how group dynamics crush individuality, and how civility evaporates under boredom and tradition. The performances feel frighteningly real. The camera never flinches. Years later, rediscovery turned it into a cult landmark. Directors praised its courage. Viewers finally saw it as a horror film without monsters, only habits. It failed because it refused to provide relief. No catharsis, no moral rescue. Just the truth about what happens when isolation meets conformity. Number 4. The Passenger, 1975. This film asked a question audiences didn't want to answer. What if you could erase your identity and it didn't save you? Michelangelo Antonioni teamed with Jack Nicholson to explore existential drift, and the result was quietly devastating. Nicholson plays a journalist who assumes another man's identity, hoping to outrun his emptiness. Instead, the new life brings new dangers and deeper disconnection. The film moves slowly, deliberately, daring viewers to sit with silence. Critics admired it. The box office ignored it. Studios couldn't market a movie that treats identity as a burden rather than a prize. The final shot alone is legendary, a long, unbroken movement that redefined what cinematic patience could accomplish. Directors still study it. Film schools still dissect it. This movie didn't fail because it lacked excitement. It failed because it stripped away illusion. No reinvention, no escape. Just movement through space and time until the self runs out of places to hide. Today, it stands as one of the most profound films of the decade. A meditation on freedom that argues freedom without meaning is just another prison. Number 3. Badlands, 1973. This movie baffled audiences by refusing to behave like a crime film. Terrence Malick took a real-life killing spree and stripped it of spectacle, turning violence into something eerily calm and almost polite. Viewers expecting tension and punishment didn't know how to react. The box office response was muted. Martin Sheen plays a young drifter who treats murder like a personality trait. Sissy Spacek's narrator describes horrific events in a flat, almost dreamy voice, as if she's recounting a childhood memory. That contrast unsettled people more than any outburst ever could. Critics were divided. Some saw genius, others saw emotional coldness. Studios didn't know how to sell a film where the most disturbing moments are delivered without emphasis. Financially, it slipped through the cracks. What makes Badlands endure is its refusal to explain itself. Malick never tells you how to feel. The camera watches. Nature keeps going. The killings barely interrupt the rhythm of the world. That perspective was radical. Later filmmakers openly borrowed its tone. The poetic violence, the innocence curdling into menace, the idea that horror can arrive quietly. Today, it's studied as one of the most influential American films ever made. This movie didn't fail because it lacked impact. It failed because it made violence feel ordinary, and audiences weren't ready to confront that truth. Number 2, Don't Look Now, 1973. Audiences walked into this expecting a thriller. What they got was grief, disguised as a mystery. Nicholas Roeg built a film where editing feels like memory itself, fractured, emotional, and unreliable. The result confused viewers and limited its commercial reach. Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie play parents shattered by loss, wandering through a decaying Venice where time folds in on itself. Clues don't lead forward, they echo backward. The city feels like a maze designed by sorrow. Critics admired its craft, but audiences struggled with its structure. The film refused to hold hands. Scenes bleed into each other. Meaning emerges slowly, painfully. Financial success never followed. What later generations recognized was its mastery. Roeg uses cuts like emotional triggers. Past, present, and future coexist. The ending recontextualizes everything without a single explanatory line. Directors cite it as a blueprint for psychological cinema. It proved that editing could be narrative, that grief could shape form itself. This wasn't ignored because it was inaccessible. It was ignored because it demanded emotional attention instead of passive consumption. Now it's considered one of the most haunting films ever made. Number 1. The King of Marvin Gardens, 1972. This film collapsed at the box office because it offered despair without decoration. Bob Rafelson reunited Jack Nicholson and Bruce Dern for a story about dreams already rotting. Audiences wanted rebellion. They got resignation. Nicholson plays a withdrawn radio host. Dern plays his unstable brother chasing impossible schemes in a dying Atlantic city. Their conversations feel half-finished, like men too tired to argue with reality anymore. Critics respected it, but audiences stayed away. There's no surge of hope, no comeback, just men circling failure with different levels of denial. The city itself feels exhausted. Empty boardwalks mirroring internal collapse. What makes it devastating now is its clarity. This film understands how ambition curdles into fantasy when opportunity dries up. Dern's performance is terrifying because it's fragile. Nicholson's is tragic because it's resigned. Directors later praised its honesty. Film historians now place it among the most truthful American films of the decade. This movie didn't fail because it lacked heart. It failed because it showed what happens when the dream stops working and nobody knows what comes next. So now the real fight starts. Which of these flops deserved better? Which one still makes you uncomfortable? And which so-called masterpiece do you think history is still ignoring? Drop your hottest take in the comments and tell me which box office disaster proves audiences don't always know what they're missing.